Good morning, sir. Diego, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How
Hey,
about you?
hey, welcome to the Real American Dream podcast, where I still believe the American dream is live and well, and that's certainly due to the inspirational stories I hear from those on my podcast that are first generation immigrants. So today we've got a fantastic guest, Diego. In fact, Diego and I have been friends and colleagues for, gosh, how long, Diego? 15 years?
Yeah, just about 15
About
years.
15 years. So it's pretty cool. So anyways, Diego, maybe you can introduce yourself, your date of birth, and your country of origin. Where are you from?
Yeah, so I was born in Brazil in Sao Paulo, July 14th, 1982.
All right. Sao
Uh,
Paulo. So what, maybe you could start with, like, what do you remember growing up in Sao Paulo?
Sao Paulo is like a big city, right? And the traffic is insane, and you got, old cars running, the roads are tight, and, people park on the roads. And, I remember Uh, also, you have like the countryside, like an hour out of the city that, you got dirt roads and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So it's an upcoming, it's an upcoming city, just tumultuous with people population, tremendous amount of people living in that little area, buildings, little apartments, just on the streets on Sundays, you walk out of your apartment and then they had like a fair, like a food fair with vegetables and stuff.
Mhm.
So it's custom to go out and purchase, your foods from the streets where they built up at like 4 in the morning. So it's a cool little experience to remind myself how it was when I was like 9 years old before I came to the United States.
And when did you come to the States, Diego? How old were you? What were you, 9?
Yeah, I was 9, 1990, right? So we're in 2022, so 32 years ago.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. So I came. It's interesting. I came over in like 93, and it's interesting as you say that, like, a lot of people that I've had on the podcast was like early 90s and all kind of similar ages. Kind of weird, but um yeah, I've been to Sao Paulo. I really loved it. So I think I've been there twice. I was there once for Carnival, and then I was there once for the World Cup. I mean, it's a big city. It's one of the bigger cities in the world, isn't it? I mean, certainly in South America.
Yeah, in Brazil, it's the epic city of commercial business, so it's
Yeah.
that. And I think it used to be like top three of the world. Maybe now it's maybe top five or six biggest
Yeah.
city in the world. So it's pretty big, yeah.
What do you remember? What do you remember, like, growing up? I mean, shoot, you left at 9 years old, but maybe your parents, right? Like, what are some things you remember about Brazil and Sao Paulo? Maybe, like, outside of your day-to-day experience, like, what was the government like in place, and was it easy to work and make money and be successful?
You kind of have to have your own business, like for things to kind of work, So my mom comes from a family where, my grandfather from World War II built he like in his garage and like underneath, the ground, like eating beans. Like this is a story that I was told. Like they would him and his brother at the time, right? And they eat down there, and like he started fixing blenders, and fixing like air conditionings and little things like electric domestic equipment. And he built up Venti Silva. So my middle name is Silva. So Venti is like a fan. So they built this company 65 years ago, even
Wow.
before I was born, right during World War II. And my grandfather and his brother, like, built this pretty big company that today my mom operates. But basically in Brazil, you had to kind of do that to survive. If you're working for someone, you're getting like minimum wage. It's very, very difficult to survive. You kind of have to be like a business owner or have a really good, product or service that you're doing.
Interesting. Yeah. So it sounds like you had people making a lot of money and then people making, like, very little money,
Right.
right?
There's a huge disparity. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
either poor or you're wealthy. There's no real middle class there.
like there is here, right? I mean, that's one of the strengths of the US is there's like, I mean, the majority of society is middle class, right?
Right.
It's
We have
different.
much more opportunity here, right? The opportunity is immense in the United States compared to where I come from. I was thinking the other day how I was able to understand the financial market and the real estate market in the US. And I would have probably never been able to understand that concept in Brazil. It would have not, the opportunities wouldn't arise as easy for me that
Yeah.
way. You know, I work full time and then I have a side job of, owning real estate and renting and having tenants and helping families, because here too, I mean, they accept immigrants, but legally, it's
There
not
he
always
is.
easy for them to get, documents and stuff like that. And here's the new generation of this country right here, Mateo.
Mateo, don't be shy.
Yeah, just say hi to Derek. Just go like this. Go like this. Here, I open up your yogurt. Here, go.
So, hey Diego, before we get into what you're doing now, because I love your story about I've always admired a lot about you because we work together and we've been friends and colleagues forever. And I saw you, at gosh, we were what, 20, 23 years old, maybe. And
Yeah,
then knowing you at 23, the grind, the hustle to where you are now is like a fantastic story. But before we get into that, hey, help, like, what was your perception of the United States when you were in Brazil very young? Like, what did you think of the States? What did your parents think of the States? I'm just curious.
it was like the place to be. My dad, the way I came to the United States, the reason why is my dad. But let me back up. My grandma was like Miss Sao Paulo. Okay, so she was an artist. My grandma passed away when she was like 50. So I was young. I was like 6 maybe or so. My dad basically grew up without a father. And my grandma was an artist, a singer. She was Miss Sao Paulo in 1970 something. Like she was, like Miss Universe. So she was like the city Miss Sao Paulo. So she was a star. So she had several relationships. And one of the relationships that she had, which was a guy that loved New York City. He was a really successful guy. And he took me for, my dad had met my mom at that point, and he had a company. So he reeled my dad into his company, showed him that, and took him to New York to make sure that he was really ready to get married and think about his marriage. And my dad fell in love with the United States. He's always
Yeah.
heard about it. So that's how he learned about it even before I was born. Then he went back, right, to Brazil and did his engineering and stuff and became like had a car dealership. And he had always this dream about coming to the US because of that one circumstance when he was young. And one day in Brazil, there was a collapse, a political, a financial collapse. And this was in 1990, right when I came, the exact moment.
Yeah.
There was a president, his last name was Collor, okay? And he froze all of the bank accounts from every person in the country. And my dad,
Was that real quick, Diego? Did he freeze bank accounts because there was an economic collapse and he just didn't? I mean, that was kind of the driver behind it and
I
didn't
don't
want
know
people pulling out a bunch of money.
I don't know all the details, but they took the money. The government needed the people's money, basically. You know what I mean? That's how it
Wow.
went. And so they supposedly paid it back in like by pennies at a time, but the inflation, it was a different. So in Brazil, inflation is a common theme. Like I hear my stepdad, I'm not, excuse me, yeah, my stepdad talks to me, or Erica's, my wife's dad. They all grew up in Brazil. That once they heard like, hey, we the foods are being delivered and things are getting more expensive, they go at the supermarket late at night and take like 4 or 5 carts of food and load them up because they at night go and reprice everything and increase by 30%, 40%, 50%, 100% on the same item. So he
Wow.
so he they went and bought a bunch like oil, um, food, things that were milk, things that were important that you needed substance. You go and shop in tons of it because the next day the price would double. So it's a turmoil situation financially. And then they locked up all this money. And my dad, being an entrepreneur, had, I guess my dad had a boat and he sold the motors of the boat to a guy that had a boat, and he did exchange rates. He exchanged. So he gave my dad a check in dollars, and he got from the bank in Brickell, Spiritu Santo Bank. So my dad got that check and said, all right, he had no money there. We all were everything was frozen. Flew to the United States, cashed that money in dollars, and then took it back. And while he was here, he looked at a couple apartments, a couple things, and just was like in love with Miami. And that's the reason then things begun. And then,
Wow.
yeah, so those motors, man, is the what caused my dad having to pick up some cash and the economy in Brazil tanking tremendously, where we didn't have access to money.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That's insane, Diego. Think about that. Like here in the States, you're right. Like what you're saying is like, inflation is kind of common. Right now, we're in a pretty bad inflationary state, as you know. But like that's what was happening in Brazil that you were used to. I couldn't imagine here in the States, like, them not allowing citizens to get money for them to use to purchase goods and services. So that was essentially the reason why you all picked up and left. Like it was just time to go. There was no way to, to pay for things, survive, and do all that.
Yeah, and then my dad had this vision about the United States. He loved this place from being, when he was in his 20s, he came, and then he came again to make the money exchange thing. And my mom, like I mentioned before, my mom worked for my grandfather, right? But my grandfather owned that business with with his brother. But his brother passed away, and my grandfather was working with his let's call it his niece, and he stepped down, and my mom stepped in. But then it was all the sisters. So it was like 10 women working together. My mom had it, and my grandfather said, no, one from each side will run the business, and they didn't choose my mom. So my mom was, really inherited in it. So when my dad came to the United States, learned about it, then she's like, okay, she was kind of done with the business too. That was a good point to kind of transition. So it was like, a big step in my family for that timing, for all that to come together.
Did you so obviously the native language in Brazil is Portuguese, right? So when you came at 9 years old, was that the only language you knew?
That's the only language I knew.
So you didn't know English?
No, it was tough, man. It was
You had to come here. And now, like, one thing that's impressed me about you, Diego, is 3 languages, right?
Yeah, I speak
English, Spanish, and Portuguese, which is pretty impressive. But so you came at 9 years old and you left. Did you come with a lot? Like, do you remember, like, did your family come with a lot, a bunch of money? Did you have those types of, was it suitcases and like you just found a spot?
Yeah, my dad got a little place in Aventura because he liked that area. Really, when he came, it wasn't even a city in North Miami. And starting, maybe we rented a place, I think, at first, right? And we stayed for a little while there that way. And then eventually, my dad, right off the bat, because he had like a car, he sold cars and like the motors, and he was an entrepreneur, and he was able to get, like, here, remember the time where the TVs had the cassettes right on top of them, the VCR? So my dad would buy these like 10 TVs, and like he would buy these cameras and these like super innovative, United States, electronics, and ship them to Brazil. And he got into buying cars and then ship Mustangs, Camaros, and things like that back.
And shipping, so he was exporting. He was basically an exporter. And that's how he was making money.
That's how he started making money, using
Isn't that crazy?
U.S. Products and selling it back once things got better, right, with Brazil. That's how we started. Yeah.
So what do you remember when you got here? I mean, you were 9 years old, knew one language. Like, what do you remember when, from the States at that young of an age?
Well, I remember having my father go and come back all the time, so he wasn't really present that much, right? Because he was trying to figure out. My mom wasn't really working. We didn't have legal documents, so it's kind of tough. But we did get into school, and I remember like trying to do spelling. I was crying, like the kids would make fun of me because I didn't know the damn language at all. It was just like a very, yeah. I remember like the teacher right now, her little gold locks in her hair, and then like trying to tell me and I couldn't even like say, and I'd cry when I come home with my mom. I'm like, you do the homework. I can't do that. That's kind of how I remember transitioning and learning about how the hell am I going to learn this language and have friends and all that. So it was tough. At 9, I was already like at, I think elementary school, coming in. So I was a little more grown up. But yeah, it was not easy to transition.
Yeah, I remember you telling me like a bunch of those stories. I remember, gosh, there's one you told me like, I think it was high school, and I guess you're on the basketball team. I don't know. You just always felt like a little different than everybody else.
Yeah.
Being Brazilian and being a first generation immigrant. I mean, and that's a big step coming from Brazil to the United States. Mine was Canada to the United States, which is probably easier from a transition perspective, but but yeah, that's interesting. So you got through high school, right? And then what'd you do?
So like in high school, my parents had split up, right? Because my dad was always coming and going. He never really was able to like build the business here because he had all this clientele there. So it was hard for him to kind of step in. And so eventually my mom and him got divorced. And I have 2 brothers. So my mom started working at the airport, the night shift. Okay, I remember growing up. It's like she would be coming home in the morning while we'd be going to school. So I
Mhm.
see her hustling, 3 kids. And in high school, I, I was starting skipping school at the end there, but I graduated. I got my degree, and then I went to FAU. I did my BA there. But I was really trying to figure out whether to go to school, college, or go to the army. I was really considering going to the army.
Really? I
Yeah,
didn't know that. So you went to FAU and graduated with your bachelor's.
right.
Were you able to pay for it? Did you get a student loan?
I got a student loan, and
Yeah.
that's one of the ways I started learning the financial markets in the United States with the student loans. That's how it started with me.
Really?
Finally got on my own. I was angry because I had to leave the house. My mom kicked me out at 18, which is the norm in the US. But in Brazil, you live at home till you're like 30. So for me,
Really?
it was just common. And so for me, I'm a man, right? Basically, my mom has 2 other kids that are younger. And she's like, hey, go, you're on your way. So we jumped, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, are you happy she did that?
Dude, I love that. I was angry though at first, and I can
Yeah.
remember being super rebel-ish, kind of, but
Yeah.
I was able to channel that instead of
Well,
doing.
you gotta learn. Like, so it's interesting. Like, I was never coddled at all by my mother. I mean, same thing at 18 years old. I flew right to Philadelphia on a soccer scholarship and like had like, $800 in my bank account. And like
Yeah,
that's what I'd have to like use for a semester. I can't remember exactly, but like I learned so much about responsibility and survival. And like if you don't have a crutch or something to go back to, like you just kind of find a way. You know what I
that's
mean?
right. That's right. So I had that right, and my dad. The only thing I had is eventually I call my dad like, "Yo, Dad, send me some money, please." And I'd work always part time. But you learn through mistakes, right? And one of the things I figured out was, I worked in like a fruit, a supermarket, whatever, while in, going to school and high school at the end, and then like it was like what is it, Whole Foods? I worked at Whole Foods, and then from there, and then I started working painting with this guy that I met through Buddhism because I started chanting. So like it's never come easy for me, man. Like I've always had to but I was able to channel and learn that sales was my career path through being young, but didn't know the right way. You can go sell drugs if you want, right? Selling, you can sell anything, but really understanding what you're good at and how you do it in a professional manner. And I was going through school, learning through that stuff.
Yeah. So you got through school, and it sounds like you've always worked. right? Like, it's not like, I mean, you're probably around the clock, school,
Yes.
grinding,
15
hard
years
work.
old. 15 years old. My first job actually was while I was in high school. I just remember I was cleaning tables. I was a bus boy. That was my first job. Like
Yeah,
15 years old, but bus boy, trying to buy my first car. I remember it like it was yesterday.
it's interesting.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, but I grew up understanding like, wow, this place, you can really work, have a degree, and grow. Just didn't know where I was going. So I had this kind of anger inside of me, trying to figure that out, right? And it did get to a point where channeling it was the way, and figuring how to dissolve it. But that drove me. That my father being away, my mom kind of saying, go figure it out. And I just, under turmoil circumstances, had to go make it happen, and that's how I learned all my characteristics and my good, my
Mhm.
personality, and develop an area of where I could be successful.
Yeah. So you graduate college, you got your bachelor's. What was your first job out of school? Do you remember, like, professional gig? What was it?
So right before I graduated, I had to get an internship for credit. So there was a career center there. And I first came over and I said, hey, I think I needed like 9 credits to graduate it. And 3 credits was for this internship. And I went to that career center and the lady's like, we don't have anything. So you got to wait another semester. And I'm like, okay. I come back the next day. I'm like, hey, have you got anything? And the lady was like, no. And I come back the next day, like, hey, to a point where she was like, I got something for you. And she connected
Probably
me.
because she was sick of you.
She was so sick of me that she eventually got me an internship at the Broward Center there, government center. And I was learning about how they were trying to help companies or people come to the United States and invest. And then learning about how all those things work. And that's where I sat for like 3 months before I graduated. So I built a relationship with this career lady at the school who then placed me for that internship finally. And then in there, one of the drivers for me there was this guy, and I remember this vividly. He's like, oh, Broward County, you can never buy a house here. Things are so expensive. You'll never be able to, no one can buy a house. Everything's so crazy. And I thought to myself, this guy is so, negative, and I was like, maybe, maybe he's off. And then he was rude. I'm like, fuck, I was like, I'm gonna buy a house here. I'm gonna figure it
Yeah.
out. It kind of put something in me. And then I finished and I graduated. And then I'm like, okay, what am I gonna do? What did I do? I went back to the career lady. I said, hey, I'm done. And he's like, yeah, we have great people gave us good feedback. I have a job for you. So the day I finished, the next day I started a job at a company in Coral Springs called Think Technologies, selling softwares to universities for their FAFSA or their the grant monies. So,
Yeah.
used to have fast on that. And before that, I bought my first car. My down payment came from a portion of the overpayment of the student loans. So I've learned that loans, you're able to get money. And if there's overflow, you're able to use it for things that you need. And I'm like, wow, this is a system, pay bills, but take loans to pay off stuff. And I was just trying to get into that. So
Yeah.
that's how I started right out of school with the student loans, got me kind of understanding how the financial stuff worked. And I finally bought my Mitsubishi Galant, which was like leather. It was really nice.
Hey, Diego, I'm curious, like, if you like back in Brazil, was it easy to access money from banks, like getting loans and stuff? I mean,
Look, till this day, right? Let's just say interest rates have gone up here, right? You want to get a loan, and let's say your credit's not good. You're going to get a shitty loan, 10%, really not good, right? But in Brazil, it's 30% today,
wow.
25%.
So the
So
cost of money is different.
it's so
Yeah,
much higher, over there for a business or for a person, and taxes are much higher. It's just
interesting.
politically very difficult to sustain. I would never be in this position, I think, if I just stayed in Brazil. It wouldn't
Really?
have. No.
All right, so let's keep going. So you're selling the software.
Yeah, so I started this job. I had a desk, $40,000 salary, which out of school, which was a nice
That
payday.
was good. That was
Yeah,
really good back then. I
yeah,
mean, that was a lot.
yeah. I got my bachelor's degree. I'm in sales. I'm selling, technology. But damn, man, I'm like, I would go in. I had my office. I made calls to university. The sales cycle of those things were like 6 months, a year. And it was like so long. So I was trying to understand how all that worked. And I would like sleep on my desk. I would like make these calls and I'd sleep. And then one day the owner, I remember, came over and he's like, "Hey man, it's not really working out," he told me. And I said, I'm not really happy, man. I'll be honest. This isn't really my thing. And, and that's kind of how I learned that I'm a transactional guy. Because that was like, I sold nothing. I was there 3 months and I didn't have one contract. I didn't sell anything. For me, by that time, I should have sold something or had a little. And these things were so long. And the guy pulled me in, he goes, and he told me straight up like this. And back then, you didn't have these computer screens. He already had them. He had like 4 screens in his office. And I'm like, holy, and he had a nice like glass. And he sat me down. He said, "Here's 3 books. Read these books on technology and sales." He's like, he said like this, "One day you'll be sitting where I'm sitting," he said to me, just like that. Who fires someone and tells them, like, "Hey, you're going to be real well, but not here, but you will." And then
Yeah.
that's kind of how I left there. So at that time, I picked up the phone and I was living with like a roommate. And I'm like, "Ma, I need to come home. Is there a way I can come home for a little bit?" That right, like 3 months after I graduated, I've been on my own for like 4 or 5 years, and then I'm like, okay. So she said, all right. So I went back to Aventura where she was, and I didn't have overhead for a little bit. And I remember I'd get the newspaper. Because back then you find jobs on the newspaper. I'd sit in the balcony and go through all the jobs that were around in sales. And I found the job in Medley selling hood cleaning services to restaurants. And when I finally got into that, the guy hired me, went over there for an interview. He hired me, and I'd go restaurant to restaurant selling these services that need to be cleaned because if they catch fire, right? The grease in these exhaust fans from restaurants could catch fire. Grease. They had a truck that would pump up the grease from underneath the ground. And I built a team. I had like 5 reps. I worked there for 1 year. My salary was like 40 grand as well, but I had an upside of commissions. And I was a 1099. So I made like 60 grand. And then I doubled these guys' revenue. I literally, like, I knocked on so many doors, B, and I got so
How
much,
many?
hundreds of doors. I mean, like, I sold chains like J. Alexander restaurant. I sold chains of restaurants, little ones, big ones. Next thing you know, they pulled me in, and I was still living. And at that time, my mom gave me 5 grand, and I bought a place. I was already living on my own in Aventura, North Miami. I remember it was a $150,000 condo. She helped me put the down payment, 5 grand. I didn't have credit. I had 2 loans, one for 110 and the other one for 40. To even get the deal done, I had to do it that way. But anyways, working for this guy, they pulled me in and they said, "You're fired." I said, "What do you mean? I just doubled. I mean, I'm selling like crazy." "You've become too expensive for me." I said, "What do you?" He's like, "Yeah, you can't afford you anymore." So they took over my job because it's already like when you're in the system every 6 months, they just go out and service it. You know what I mean? They didn't have to go out and sell anymore.
You
They,
built their business, and then they just go do renewals. They had enough business that Diego built. Now we just have a guy that goes out and renews it. That's it.
that's it. So
Yeah, I
I,
mean,
I then got into this lady, recruiter lady said, "I got a job for you. It's the copier industry." And I was like, okay. And that's how I got in. And at Sharp, I did an interview with Sharp, and they were Enrico. Enrico offered me a job, and Sharp did too. But Sharp had a little bit of a higher base. It was like 45 with a car expense. It was just a little bit higher than the 37 that Rico was
yeah,
doing. So I said, "Hey, Rico, thank you very much. I'm going with Sharp." And they were in the same like shopping center.
I
Like it was
remember.
like
Yeah,
this. And
yeah.
okay, so I said,
Was
"I'm
that
going
the office? Was that the office down in Miami Lakes? It was that one,
to Miami
right?
Lakes,
Yeah.
Miami
Okay.
Lakes." So that was my first job there at selling copper. So I went to Brazil and they're like, yeah, no problem. I'm gonna be a week away or 10 days away and I'll be back. Next thing you know, 5 days in, they sent me an email like, oh, sorry, we got a better guy. You're not have the job. I'm like, what? I'm like, I'm young. I'm finally getting things going. I got a good gig. I'm super excited. I went to Brazil. Next thing you know, I'm like, okay, I come back and I'm like, the first thing I drive to Miami Lakes, go to Rico, and they say, please give me the job. I need to work here.
I remember.
And that's how I started at Rico.
I remember I came out of my office and you were leaning up against the wall, like waiting to talk to, I think, Albert or maybe Chain, but
yeah.
Gosh, and like if I could hop in here, like, I hear a lot of good, like, it's that first generation immigrants, like entrepreneurial spirit. And I say this on every podcast, but the commonality is always like work level. I mean, first generation immigrants will just get after it. I mean, it's very true, man. It's very common across those that did come to this country. And gosh, when we worked together, you were relentless. I mean, you would not take no. I mean, gosh, I remember when you went to that, it was like end of the month. So we sold on months, remember?
Yeah.
And you went to that lawyer's office. I'm like, Diego, you got to get the contract. And you showed up at the guy's office. And I think you stayed there in an attorney's office. I think you stayed there for like 6 hours waiting in his lobby, waiting for him to leave the office to get him to sign the contract on the last day of the month. Is that pretty accurate if I remember correctly? This is like 2000. This might have been like 2005 or 6. This was a while ago.
Yeah. And that is a true story, D. I remember also I would sit there and wait, and the lady in the front be like, hey, he's not coming. I'm like, it's all right. I'm just gonna wait. I just need 5 minutes. And it was the end of the day. He finally came and he's like, he gave me the opportunity to sign up with me because I was just not giving up on it, made it work. So that's kind of cool. And I remember doing this to so many people, but not that guy. I mean, I remember sitting in this Schlesinger's office, the other law firm, in the parking lot, in my car, waiting for Giselle to step out.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you just would not allow yourself to fail. Like, honestly, Diego, that's like, and you were always like top 10% in that office among like 3 or 4 sales teams because you were relentless. You had a certain amount of grit and determination and courage. You just would not allow yourself to not be successful, I remember. And gosh, we worked together. We were on the same team for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years, maybe. I don't know. I can't remember.
I remember like you, about 3. I worked for you. I was on. Yeah. And I remember. I think after a while, you're like, no, I'll take Diego on my team. Like you made an effort to get me on.
Yeah,
you did it for a while.
Well, I remember. I mean, Diego, you were pretty. What's the right word? You were pretty
intense.
Yeah, you're very intense, and I think you might have rubbed some people the wrong way. But look, I always admired the things I just spoke about you, and like a lot of managers didn't want to touch you, and I was like, shit, put them on my team. I'll take them right now because I saw like you didn't like you would just make it happen. But what they didn't like were some of the personality things. But I was like, hey, I'll take Diego all day. Let me work with him. And I took on that challenge and it worked out great for both of us. I mean, I was very thankful that we, not only business, but like our friendship, like through that whole, like the time that you were on my team.
You really helped me, D. I mean, I was a little rebel, and I had like all this like mixed emotions, barely could probably do the right things, but I was like, I had a mindset and I was just going to go do what I had to do. But yeah, it was really nice that we were able to connect. And like, even for that job, I wanted a leadership job, right? I mean, geez, I think I interviewed like 5 times till Al finally gave me a position, like.
And I remember you were on my team and Al was like, tell me about Diego. And I said, look, I'm telling you, if you can kind of rein in the wild horse here, you can do that. He would be a fantastic sales leader. And I remember you again, some courage. You left Miami and moved up to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Remember? And you ran that sales team up there, and you did well. You did
Yeah.
well. I mean, someone just needed to believe in you, and I think Al did. God rest Al, right? That's a whole nother series of conversations. But yeah, man, you did really well. I was proud of you. I mean, you had my full recommendation.
That was so nice that we worked together, D, and you gave me that opportunity. I'm thankful for that, man. It was really
You earned it.
special.
You earned it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, like, again, like who you are as a person. Is that first generation immigrant kind of entrepreneurial spirit, work ethic, grit. It's like totally inside. And I think a lot of that, by the way, was modeled by your father, right? I mean, you kind of saw it growing up.
Yeah.
But tell us about, like, because you started doing this real estate thing, I think in Melbourne, actually, or maybe you maybe bought an apartment in Miami. I can't remember, but kind of Melbourne is where you really started to dive into this. I'd love to hear more about the business you've built in real estate, and like talk about, like, correlate that back to like the opportunity that people have in America that may not be the same other places to build something that you built.
Yeah. So I remember going to Melbourne and I rented a place. I had a little condo in Miami already, and I rented it out to my brother. He was growing up. So I said, hey, I gave him a discount on the rent and said, hey, you live here while I'm there. You need to get out of mom's place, my youngest brother. And he had just finished college. So he went to US. So he moved into my place and I moved to Melbourne. And I rented a little place and got to know the area. And the first thing, like a year later, is, after feeling comfortable, I bought a house. That was like the big first step. And then from there, I just started, and then the economy was going to tanks,
I
man. It
remember.
was in '08 or
Yeah.
something like that. And everything had gone down. And I've been hustling with copiers, man, making money while people were suffering. I remember, like, I'd sell used machines like for half the price instead of the
Yeah.
new ones. And they were paying out more cash than the new ones for us.
Yeah.
And people needed that savings to keep going. And basically, I bought a little, bankrupt, whatever, foreclosure.
Close.
Yeah. And then my apartment in Miami went downhill. Like, I paid 150 at the time, it was worth 30. And it was like, holy crap. And then I took my money and paid, bought a place for another like 40 grand in like Melbourne. And then I bought another place for like 50 grand. And I just kept saving money and buying these I had like four little condos there, and from that, I got a real cool real estate lady that helped me do that. And then I became a little investor. And then I tell myself, once this gets to a certain price, I'll sell. And then I started getting into houses instead of, condos, old broken down condos. I had to like evict the lady. I always work with people, man. I got 13 properties today here in the US. And like, I give immigrants the opportunity to rent for me that are better sometimes than, the good old American guy that needs everything flushed out and cleaned out and all this stuff, that they're willing to do a little bit more to take care of my place, but also know that they don't have a lot of opportunity to find another place. So I find myself helping the economy and people as well, but always, it's a profit, right? It's for my growth. But there's so much opportunity in that, on the ups and downs of this market. And I've learned the financial market due to that crisis, because eventually I had to hire a lawyer to sustain my condo, because it didn't make sense to me keep paying for something that wasn't worth something. So I dragged that thing out for like 5 years. And then I was able to understand, and I tried to sell it like short sale. They approved finally the short sale, but the lady that was going to come to buy it gave me an offer, but she couldn't buy through a loan in that building because there were so many, properties that were under. The bank didn't want to loan it. So I had to find a loophole to figure out how to go about selling that place and getting it out of my name. And then I
Yeah.
sold it to, a certain person that would eventually, teach me how this all kind of works. So I've been through the downs and the ups, and I can do it all over again, man. But it comes with the fact that, I come from another country. I also see the fact that I didn't have an option. I had to make it work. I didn't have my dad or my mom, like, I had to do it. I was the
Yeah.
oldest. and just saw the opportunities once you started working to see that money come in and understand that this is the place. I wouldn't trade the U.S. for any other place in the world.
Why
This
is that? Why is that?
this is the place where you can actually have freedom. This is a place where you can actually make money. This is a place where the laws work. This is a place where you want your kids to be raised, where they learn the U.S. language and understand the way things work, and
Yeah.
they abide by the laws. This country has really good, laws where people stand by it. In Brazil, for say, you have a tenant or you have some, get them out of the house. It ain't like over here. You write a letter to the judge, and within 2-3 months they're out.
Yeah.
There it takes years. The systems just don't work. So then people do wrong because they know it won't catch up to them for so long.
No
So everything
accountability.
works.
Yeah.
So everything works in this country, man. I'm grateful, so grateful.
Yeah. So Diego, you own 13 properties. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
You're
13.
sitting on and where do you live now?
I live in Parkland, Florida, man.
What kind of look, I already know the answers here, but I love your success story in terms of creating, I don't know if it's wealth or, but just creating your financial situation from where you are today to think of where you and your family were at 9 years old. I mean, look at the difference.
It's tremendous. Even I've been married for 9 years now, or I've been with my wife for 9 years. I've been married 6 years, and I have a son. He's 5. And so, why is this important? Well, when I met my wife, I had that one little condo in Miami, basically, and
Yeah.
I had a few properties in Melbourne. I've doubled or tripled in size, and from that time, and just the last 10 years, it's been tremendous. But that comes with that engine of that work engine, right? That day-to-day job, and then on the side, investing in real estate. And today, I live on a 1.1 acre lot. It's a 7 bedroom, 5 bath house. It's worth at least $2 million to $3 million, somewhere in there. And I have a Ferrari in the garage. I bought a Mercedes yesterday, a red one. And then I've got my truck and I got the X7 BMW. I've got 4 top-notch cars. They're all 2019 or 2020, just the Ferrari's an '07, but it's got less mileage than any of the new cars. And I've been able to, I have a boat in the backyard that I own. I'm actually building my garage in the back. I have a 2-car garage in the front, but in the back, I'm making it like a guest house. So it'll have an extra bedroom and bath there. So it's going to 8 bedrooms and 6 bath, my whole house. So these are things I've been able to have the vision for and go for it, not be scared about it.
Well, and only in America. I mean, literally, Diego, you came to this country with kind of nothing in a sense, and now you've built something that's like through hard work, through some some entrepreneurial spirit, and just and then taking advantage of what this country offers. I mean, look, you said it right. I mean, structurally, how we're built, in my mind, a lot of the power is given to the people, not the government. And when people have power in a society, they have freedoms. And with freedoms, you can excel. And, look where you are now by literally living the American dream. I mean, millions of people want to come here and replicate what you just did. And million people are here replicating what you're doing. It's unbelievable.
Yes, this is a beautiful country, man. I love the United States. This is the place that I will be forever. I may go back to Brazil for a little while and come back. And if I chose right now to just call it quits and I want to retire, I think I could. I could probably sell some of those homes, keep some maybe, but probably take all these US dollars and live easily in Brazil for the rest of my life. But I'm not built that way, man. I want to build more, and I want to help more people. And so this is a really a wonderful place, and I can only see it getting better, but it depends on the people to make that happen.
Yeah. So, hey, kind of last question here as we wind down. You know, the whole reason I do this podcast is because I believe in this country. And quite frankly, I have a similar story, probably not as successful as you are, but similar story. And I'm very grateful for the country. And my family assimilated to American tradition, values, etc. We found that to be important, and you have too. And but there's lots in this country. There's a lot of people I see that will say, hey, the American dream's dead, or it's not what it used to be, right? Like the country's fundamentally shifted where it's harder to be successful and live in this country and achieve the things you want to achieve. And that's the reason I do this podcast, because your story counters that. But what would you say to those people that say the dream isn't alive?
They're totally wrong, 100%, because it is alive. This is the place where you can start from nothing and build up to something special. But the thing is, it depends on them. So it's easy to point the finger when the other finger's pointing back at you. What are you doing? How are you taking action to make that happen? And that's where the struggle is yeah, things are probably harder, not easier. Things are not going to get easier, but it comes about you making the effort, you taking that upon yourself to make a change, to go after it. And the opportunities are there. But if you don't do anything, then it ain't going to happen. So it's easy to just point, go do it yourself.
That's it. Well, Diego, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. Your story is awesome. And thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. I thank you too, D. We have a great friendship. You're on to something big, and I'm loving to be part of it. Also, your story is also very similar to mine, and I'm really happy that we're living this together.
Absolutely. Thanks, Diego.
All right, bud. See ya.